Greetings and salutations, party animals. We continue our study of the Greek language by looking at participles. Now, it's been said that participles are the genius of the Greek language, and I think that you're going to find that participles are really interesting, they're really exciting, they add a lot to our understanding of Greek syntax, they really help us to read the Greek New Testament. So this is an exciting thing to learn. But it can also be hard because we don't think about how participles work in English very well, and they work differently in Greek. So what is a participle in Greek? Participles are verbal adjectives, which means they have features of verbs like tense and voice, right? Active voice, passive voice, middle voice. They have tense. Are they present? Are they aorist? What tense are participles? And they also function like adjectives, meaning that they have case, number, and gender. So in function, participles will be either more verbal, they'll look more like verbs or function more like verbs, or they're more adjectival, which means they have a wider range of flexibility, requiring us to look at the context of the adjective or the participle to know if it's functioning more like a verb or more like an adjective. That'll become more clear as we go on. What I want to do before we get into the syntax of how participles actually work and look at some examples in the Greek New Testament, what I want to first do is just introduce you to the forms of participles. So first we begin with the present active participle. So because they function like adjectives, participles in the present active have to have masculine, feminine, and neuter forms because just like with adjectives, when participles are modifying a noun, they are going to agree with the noun they're modifying in case, in number, and in gender. So they have to have three genders. And we have to have nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative participles in the singular and plural. Now look at these endings on the masculine singular present active participle. So that's on, ontos, onti, onta, ontes, onton, usin, ontos. Now this usin here, this is a movable nu, so sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. It's going to depend on the writer's preference and if the next word starts with a vowel. So these are the forms, and if you pay attention, you might say, I remember these: on, ontos, onti, onta, ontes, onton, usin, ontos. These kind of look like, third declension forms. So these aren't totally new endings, but they're going to occur on these present active participles. Now, you don't just have masculine, you also have feminine. Usa, uses, use, usan, usai, uson, usais, usas. And so you have these endings that are telling me I'm looking at a feminine participle. Then we have neuter participles: on, ontas, onti, on, onta, onton, usin, onta. Now notice the neuter and the masculine are exactly the same except in the nominative and in the accusative, which, as we would expect with our neuter case, we have the nominative and the accusative forms are exactly the same. Luan, luan, luanta, luanta. So in form, these are the present active participles, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Let's look at the form of the present middle passive participle, which you'll notice looks a lot like the second declension. So again, you're not memorizing whole new endings, you're just sort of seeing them on a new kind of word. We're looking at these as participles. So masculine middle passive: luamenas, luamenu, luameno, luamenon, luamenoi, luamenon, luamenois, luamenus. Looking at the feminine: luamene, luamenes, luamenane, luamenane in the accusative, luamenane, luamenai, luamenon, luamenais, luamenas. So notice the genitive plural looks exactly the same whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. So you're going to have to tell based on context which form is appearing. In the neuter, luamenon, luamenu, luameno, luamenon, luamena, luamenon, luamenois, luamena. And again, the neuter singular and the accusative singular, as well as the neuter plural and the accusative plural in in the neuter, the nominative and accusative forms are the same. So these endings, os, u, au, on, oi, on, ois, us, look very similar to what you'd expect on the second declension nouns that we've learned and we've known for quite a long time now. So these are the different forms of the present active participle, the present middle passive participle. Now, how would you translate these? So in the present active participle, we would say loosing. That's how you're going to translate these. We'll look more at the syntax in a minute, but I want to just sort of introduce this is loosing. In the present middle passive participle, which again looks like the second declension, typically you're going to opt for the passive being loosed. So you want to stay in the present being loosed, but then in the middle it would be loosing oneself. But most often you're going to see passive. And of course, don't forget our old friends, the deponents, these verbs that are middle passive in form, but they get translated in the active voice. Verbs like erkomai, poruomai, prosukomai, euangelidzomai, apokrinomai, ginomai. These deponent verbs that are middle passive in form, but active in meaning. So that introduces us to the forms of the present active and the present middle passive participles. Present active, loosing. Present middle passive, being loosed, typically again in the passive, and don't forget our old friends, deponents. Those are the forms of participles.